The morning Emily arrived in Hobart, the city lay draped in a pale winter mist, the Derwent River barely visible through the low-hanging clouds. Her breath puffed in little white clouds as she stepped off the small regional flight, a shiver running down her spine despite the thick coat she'd packed. Tasmania was cold, colder than Sydney, colder than anything she had anticipated. She hugged her camera bag closer, the leather strap biting into her shoulder, and glanced at the snow-dusted peaks of Mount Wellington in the distance. Somehow, the sight both exhilarated and intimidated her. Emily had come to Tasmania for work, an assignment she had dreamed of for years. The magazine had wanted a photo series that captured the raw, untamed beauty of the island, and she'd been ecstatic when they approved her proposal. Snow-dappled forests, wild rivers, and the chance to glimpse Tasmanian devils in the wild, it was a photographer's paradise. But stepping into this chilly landscape, far from her bustling Sydney apartment, she felt a flicker of doubt. Her first day was spent driving the winding roads that hugged the coastline, the wind whistling through the open windows despite the heater blasting in her little rental car. She'd planned to stop at the edge of a small, secluded forest reserve, hoping to photograph the sunlight filtering through ancient myrtle trees. Tasmania's winter sun was weak, casting long, ghostly shadows across the undergrowth, and Emily felt a thrill at the thought of capturing it, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. Halfway down a narrow, gravel track, the engine of her car coughed once, twice, and then died entirely. She muttered a frustrated curse under her breath, tugging at the keys and checking the fuel gauge. Nothing. The car was dead. She was stranded in the middle of nowhere, the trees standing tall and silent around her, the forest floor dusted with frost. Perfect, she whispered, brushing her hair from her face. The cold bit at her cheeks, and for the first time, she felt truly isolated. She pulled out her phone, no signal. Typical, she thought. Tasmania's wild beauty came with a side of inconvenience. That's when she heard footsteps crunching on the frost-covered leaves. Emily turned, shielding her eyes from the pale winter sun, and saw a man approaching. He was tall, rugged, and dressed in a thick woolen jumper, a scarf looped carelessly around his neck. His boots were caked with mud, and there was a warm, easy grin on his face that contrasted sharply with the cold, silent forest. "You all right there?" he called, his voice calm and friendly. "Car trouble?" Emily hesitated, unsure whether to feel relieved or embarrassed. "Yeah," she admitted, a little defensively. It just stopped." "Looks like you've got a dead battery," he said, crouching down to peer under the bonnet. "Name's Lachlan, by the way. I run the tour guides up north, but I'm heading south today." Emily introduced herself, and just like that, the first thread of connection was spun. Lachlan moved with confidence, opening his kit in the back of his four-wheel drive and producing jumper cables with a flourish. He worked quickly, talking to her in a steady, reassuring tone, asking about her camera and the kind of photographs she was hoping to capture. Emily found herself relaxing, the icy tension in her shoulders melting slightly in his easy company. While waiting for the engine to turn over, they exchanged small talk. Lachlan spoke of Tasmania like it was a living, breathing entity, full of quirks and surprises. He mentioned the obscure wineries tucked into the Tamar Valley, the hidden waterfalls near Cradle Mountain, and the nocturnal animals that only revealed themselves to those patient enough to wait. Emily listened, captivated, not just by his knowledge, but by the warmth and humor that shone through his words. Finally, with a sputter and a cough, the car roared back to life. Emily laughed in relief, a sound that surprised even her. "I owe you," she said, gripping the steering wheel with renewed vigor. "Don't mention it," Lachlan said, brushing mud from his hands. "Though I'd be happy to show you some of the best spots around here while you're at it. Tasmania's not exactly friendly if you try to explore it alone in winter." Emily hesitated. She was used to independence, to tackling challenges on her own. But something in Lachlan's confident yet gentle manner made her consider it. Perhaps she could let someone guide her for once. "All right," she said finally, a tentative smile forming. Show me what Tasmania has to offer, then. As they drove away from the frost-covered trees, Emily glanced at the rugged, smiling man beside her and felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest. The road ahead was winding, and the winter air was sharp and cold, but for the first time since she arrived, Emily felt the stirring of warmth. Something told her that this trip, this place, and this unexpected companion might change more than just her portfolio. Outside, the Tasmanian landscape stretched endlessly, mountains dusted with snow, rivers glinting like silver, and the pale winter sun casting a gentle glow on everything it touched. Inside the car, Emily and Lachlan shared quiet laughter, stories of past adventures, and subtle glances that lingered a little too long. In the midst of Tasmania's cold, something new and unpredictable was beginning to spark. By the time they reached their first photography spot, a small clearing where sunlight dappled the frost-covered ground, Emily felt a sense of anticipation she hadn't expected. The island was harsh, wild, and beautiful, just like the man beside her. And somehow, she suspected that her Tasmanian adventure was about to become far more personal than she'd ever imagined. The next few days slipped by in a blur of crisp air, frost-dusted mornings, and the quiet magic of Tasmania's wild landscapes. Emily had quickly learned that Lachlan knew every hidden nook and cranny of the island. From secret waterfalls tucked deep within Mount Field National Park to the rolling vineyards of the Tamar Valley, he guided her with the ease of someone entirely at home in this harsh, yet breathtaking environment. Emily found herself laughing more than she had in months. Lachlan's humor was subtle, dry, with just the right touch of teasing that made her smile despite the cold that nipped at her cheeks. On the second morning, as they trudged through a forest blanketed in frost, he nudged her gently with an elbow when she slipped on a patch of ice. "Careful, city girl," he said with a grin. "You'll end up on your ass before we even reach the waterfall." She rolled her eyes, but her smile betrayed her amusement. "Thanks for the vote of confidence," she said. "I'm sure I'll manage." "You will, with a little guidance," Lachlan replied, his voice warm, calm, almost coaxing. Emily noticed the way he seemed to anticipate her needs without being overbearing, and it stirred something inside her, a sense of trust she hadn't expected to feel so quickly. Their days were filled with long walks, photographing frost-covered landscapes, and quiet moments of shared reflection. Lachlan was surprisingly candid about his life in Tasmania. He had grown up in a small town near Launceston and had never really left, despite the occasional temptation to see the world. He spoke about his love for the island's wildlife, the simplicity of life here, and the few heartbreaks that had shaped him. Emily found herself opening up as well. She spoke of her hectic life in Sydney, the constant pressure to succeed, and the loneliness that came with being surrounded by people yet feeling entirely unseen. Lachlan listened without judgment, offering small insights, but mostly just hearing her. It was a strange, comforting sensation, to be understood without having to explain everything. One evening, they stopped at a small cabin near Cradle Mountain to escape the biting wind. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace contrasted sharply with the cold outside. Lachlan had brought a thermos of Tasmanian cider, and Emily sipped it slowly, the spicy heat warming her from within. They talked long into the evening, the conversation meandering from trivial things to the deeper questions of life. At one point, Lachlan reached over to adjust the scarf around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin. Emily felt a shiver, but it wasn't from the cold. She looked up at him, searching his eyes, and found nothing but quiet, easy sincerity. Her heart fluttered in a way she hadn't expected, unexpected, thrilling, and slightly terrifying. The romance was slow, subtle, but unmistakable. A lingering touch here, a shared laugh there, and the stolen moments where they would stand side by side, gazing at the snow-laden trees, or the pale winter sun reflecting on a frozen creek. Each moment was charged with a tension that neither of them seemed willing, or able, to ignore, but the Tasmanian idyll wasn't without challenges. Emily's editor had sent urgent messages requesting updates and drafts for the magazine. She felt the tug of responsibility, the pull of the life she had built back in Sydney. The thought of leaving Lachlan, and the quiet, serene world he had introduced her to made her stomach twist. Lachlan, too, faced uncertainty. A temporary contract for guiding wildlife tours in another part of Tasmania had come through, and while it was promising for his career, it threatened to separate him from Emily just as their connection deepened. Both were forced to confront the reality that love, however sudden and bright, came with decisions that carried weight. One particularly cold evening, after photographing the aurora australis from a remote hilltop, Emily shivered under her thick jacket. Lachlan draped a blanket over her shoulders, and for a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the sky dance with green and violet ribbons of light. The universe felt enormous and infinite, yet strangely intimate, as if it had conspired to place them here together. "I wish we could stay here forever," Emily murmured, her voice almost lost in the wind. Lachlan glanced at her, the faintest smile on his lips. "Me too," he said softly. "But we've got choices, Em. Life doesn't always wait for us to catch up." Emily nodded, the weight of his words settling in. Despite the magic around them, reality loomed, a reminder that love, as intoxicating as it could be, demanded courage and compromise. She knew she would have to decide whether to continue her fast-paced career in Sydney or embrace the slower, unpredictable rhythm of life with Lachlan in Tasmania. Yet, despite the uncertainty, there was no denying the pull between them. A quiet intimacy had developed, shared blankets, glances that lingered too long, conversations that revealed truths they hadn't shared with anyone else. Each moment deepened their connection, weaving a delicate, invisible thread between them. By the end of their second week together, Emily realized that the cold of Tasmania had begun to feel less like a challenge and more like a backdrop, a stage for something far more significant. Lachlan had become a constant presence, a steady warmth against the biting winds. And somewhere, amid snow-dusted forests and icy rivers, Emily felt the first true stirrings of something she hadn't expected: love, fragile yet persistent, flickering to life in the unlikeliest of places. The days grew shorter as winter deepened, and the Tasmanian landscape seemed to take on a sharper, more dramatic beauty. Snow lay heavier on the peaks of Mount Wellington, and the rivers ran swifter, darker, and colder than before. For Emily, every morning brought a mixture of exhilaration and hesitation. She had fallen completely under the spell of the island and, more surprisingly, under the spell of Lachlan. But with each sunrise came the nagging awareness of her obligations back in Sydney, the looming deadlines, the magazine's expectations, and the life she had left behind. Lachlan, too, had been wrestling with his own decisions. His temporary contract outside the North Coast promised professional growth, yet the thought of leaving Emily behind gnawed at him. They had spoken about it briefly, their conversations careful, tentative, filled with pauses that said more than words ever could. Both of them understood that what they had was precious, but fragile, and that choices had to be made. One morning, Emily awoke to a fierce blizzard rattling the cabin. She stared out the frost-lined window, mesmerized by the swirling snow and the way it blanketed the world in white. Lachlan was already awake, packing a small kit for a photography excursion despite the storm. He looked at her and smiled, a warm, steady reassurance in the midst of chaos. "Storm's fierce," he said, tugging his jacket tighter. "You sure you're up for this?" Emily hesitated, glancing at the swirling snow. Part of her wanted to retreat to the warmth of the fireplace, to remain safe and insulated. But another part, the adventurous, impulsive side she hadn't known she still had, urged her to go. She nodded, determination set in her eyes. "I'll manage," she said. They set out, trudging through the thickening snow, the wind biting at their faces. The trail was treacherous, the footing uncertain, yet Lachlan guided her with unwavering patience. At one point, Emily slipped on a hidden patch of ice, and he caught her firmly, their bodies pressed together for a heartbeat. She looked up at him, breathless from the fall and from the closeness, and realized how much she had come to rely on his presence, not just for safety, but for comfort and warmth. The blizzard forced them to take shelter under a rocky overhang near a frozen creek. Inside, they huddled together, sharing a single blanket. The storm roared outside, but inside, there was a stillness, a quiet intimacy that neither of them wanted to break. Emily turned to Lachlan, her heart pounding, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I don't want this to end," she admitted. Lachlan looked at her, the wind tousling his hair, eyes soft with something Emily hadn't dared hope for. "Neither do I," he said simply. "But we need to decide how we make this work." The conversation was honest, raw, and necessary. They talked about Emily's work, Lachlan's career opportunities, and the practicalities of staying together. It wasn't easy, and at times, their voices trembled with frustration and fear. But beneath the tension was an undeniable truth: their feelings for each other were real, and strong enough to warrant compromise. By the time the storm eased and they returned to the cabin, a decision had formed. Emily would extend her stay, balancing her photography assignments with life on the island. Lachlan would remain rooted in Tasmania, but be open to short trips or collaborations that allowed them to stay connected. It was not a perfect solution, but it was one built on trust, commitment, and mutual respect. That evening, they ventured to a small hill outside the cabin, the sky clearing to reveal a breathtaking panorama of the Tasmanian wilderness. Snow sparkled like diamonds across the valleys, and the pale winter sun cast long, golden shadows over the mountains. Emily lifted her camera, but this time, she found herself hesitating. The view was beautiful, yes, but her eyes kept returning to Lachlan, his rugged profile outlined against the snow, the gentle curve of his smile, the way he looked at her with quiet devotion. She lowered the camera, letting it rest against her chest. Lachlan noticed, stepping closer. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Emily nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'm more than okay," she whispered. I think I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." In that moment, the tension and uncertainty melted away. They embraced, the cold wind swirling around them, but unable to touch the warmth that radiated between them. Lachlan pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, and Emily felt an unexpected release, a sense of safety, of belonging she hadn't experienced in years. The wilderness stretched endlessly around them, wild and untamed, yet within its embrace, they had found each other. The following days were filled with a gentle, satisfying rhythm. Emily worked on her photographs, capturing the snow-blanketed forests, the sun glinting off frozen rivers, and the serene beauty of Tasmania's winter. Lachlan joined her on excursions, offering guidance, companionship, and laughter. Their love wasn't loud or dramatic, it was steady, a quiet fire burning against the cold, a mutual understanding that grew stronger with each shared experience. By the end of her extended stay, Emily realized that the island had changed her. She had come seeking breathtaking landscapes, but she had found something far more extraordinary: a connection that defied distance, a love that promised growth, adventure, and warmth even in the harshest conditions. As they stood together on a snowy hill one last evening, Emily lifted her camera for a final shot of the horizon. Lachlan stood beside her, his hand brushing hers, and for a moment, she captured not just the landscape, but the story of their shared journey, the cold, the storms, the laughter, and the warmth that had blossomed between them. Tasmania had tested them, challenged them, and in the process, it had gifted them something neither of them had expected: love, steadfast and true, igniting even in the coldest winter.